Hello and welcome to the CLB Forge podcast. This is the show to help equip you and your church for mission, ministry, and making disciples. I'm Ryan Nelson.
I'm Mike Natal. Welcome to episode 20. Man, that's pretty exciting, huh? We made it out of the teens. We are entering our 20s.
Yeah.
Episode 21, we are legal to, well, we won't go there. But then we're getting pretty close to being able to rent a car, too.
Yeah. Next episode will be old enough to rent a car. That's right.
Right?
The end must be near, too.
So, the end must be near of what?
The show, it must all fall apart if we've made it this far.
No. We're in this for the long haul. I mean, so this is once again another episode where we don't have a guest on. It's just you and me, Ryan. All right.
Yep. Best
buds back together again, talking about trains, and I'll cry about sports, and we'll maybe talk about what's the next thing that we can talk about. Maybe we can talk about hiking this time. Maybe I'll use a hiking illustration.
That'd be great.
We'll see how it goes. So we are chugging along. Chugga, choo, choo. I hope by the end of this, Ryan, you get so good at mixing that you can take all of my train noises and you can like refurbish them into like a sweet mix. Maybe actually we might ask Nick Joyelle, be like, Nick, can you cover all this stuff together, put it all together and make it into like a sweet little like song. And that could be our new intro is just the crazy noises that Mike makes during the podcast.
I want to see that happen.
What do you think? I do too.
I hope that
Nick Joyelle, you are hired, Nick Joyelle. Be ready. I'm coming at you, bro.
And you're welcome, Nick. You're welcome.
Yeah. We just gave you a plug. If you're into hip hop music, check out Nick Joyelle. He's got some good stuff going. Check him out. All right, Ryan, let's get back on track and talk a little bit more about trains. So we are in this series called Church on Track, and I believe we're opening up our fourth train car. Is that correct?
We are opening the fourth train car. This is not a podcast about trains, but we are beating to death the train analogy to talk about keeping your church on track. This is the Church on Track series. And the first part of this series is about derailing factors. So things that can derail your church's ministry in your direction. And oftentimes these are things that we may not even notice that they're going on around us. So we're talking about them so that we can help identify them and help prevent them from causing problems unintentionally. So all with the aim of not to discourage you or weigh you down, but to give you some encouragement, some guidance, and free you up to lead your churches. So we've covered a few of these already of the derailing factors. So episode 14, we talked about life stage. Episode 16, we talked about forgetting the functions of the church. Episode 18, we talked about size dynamics. Today in episode 20, we're going to be talking about success. And then up ahead still are anxiety, mission drift, and some common breakdown areas. So we'll be talking about those down the road. So let's jump into number 4 here. Success. Can you read that, Mike? Can you read that?
Yeah, I sure can. It says success.
Yes. Yeah.
Nice.
Thank you. So our poor listeners they know what's happening and they're bored because we just repeat the same thing over.
Yeah, but
sorry about that.
Repetition is, I have no phrase for that, but repetition is something that somebody uses for stuff.
The phrase is repetition makes the master.
Oh, that sounds
so
bad.
My Hebrew professor told us that.
Interesting.
And I want to quickly change the topic off of how well I have retained my Hebrew.
Yes.
So let's talk about
God's Hesed.
Something else.
And let's talk about success.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay. So success is one of the derailing factors that can cause trouble for you. Do you have a hunch? Why would I this seems kind of counterintuitive. Do you have any thoughts on this, Mike? Why would I put this one on the list here?
Well, Ryan, I've learned something before, and it comes from Star Trek.
Oh,
or
great.
no, it comes from Star Wars, the better star. And it's a quote from Admiral Akbar, and maybe people know it. I refuse to answer that question because I think it's a trap.
It's a trap.
Yep, it's a trap.
Okay, that's
So,
fine. You don't have to answer it. That's fine.
all right, great.
Yeah.
Tell me about
Okay.
success. Why is that a pitfall or a derailment factor?
Success can you derail you? It is kind of interesting how it can get you into trouble. Now, success does not always mean trouble's right around the corner.
Mhm.
Uh, when we're leading change and helping our church adapt its ministry to communicate the gospel, crossing cultural barriers in an effective way, one of the important things that we can do is build on one success or accomplishment to encourage and motivate people on to another. So that's
Mhm.
ideally the way that we want to use and celebrate success when something goes well. We want to give God the glory for it. We also want to use that to communicate stories of the power of the gospel to our church family, to encourage them, to give them courage and boldness for that next thing that God has for us in store. So that's ideally how you use success to further the ministry of your church. But it can actually also be a derailing factor if it's not used correctly. So
Hmm.
if you aren't intentional about communicating effectively around your church's successes, it can become a derailing factor. So here's a little bit of a picture of how that is.
Hmm.
When something is going really well, people will recognize it and celebrate it, but there can also, not always, but there can also be this tendency to then also say, this is going well, let's always do this, let's never stop doing this. We talked about this a little bit when we were talking about the life stages of churches. When a
Hmm.
ministry is going well, it can be tempting to stop evaluating it and to decide it's successful, it's a success, or we're a success as a church, and we stop reflecting on how we're doing, and we stop reflecting on how effective things are. We stop assessing whether or not something needs to change, and we stop taking in new ideas.
Hmm.
We become less open to new things. We also
So the derailment factor is when success turns us complacent, right? When
That's
it
right.
just kind of, when we're like, hey,
Yeah.
we can just sit back and enjoy this. And it's like,
Yep.
ooh, be careful.
Yep. Things are
Yeah.
just the way I want them to be, and people will begin to experience a level of comfort
Hmm.
and begin to make decisions in their minds and their attitudes that are actually setting the stage for real challenges and problems. So uh, uh, you hear that in the way that, like, so one time I heard someone say to me, I want new people to come to the church, but not so quickly that it changes our church, or not so many that it changes our church, right? So
Yeah.
there you can see, like, there's a level of comfort with the status quo. We'll let people new in, which by nature will change your church, but we don't want them to change it. That just can't happen. Right? So,
Yeah.
and these are the default responses to success. So that's when things are going well. You do need to, as a leader, you need to communicate a healthy narrative with that. You need to uh, give God the glory for it, and also you use that accomplishment or that positive thing to advance to that next step that God has for you. In the absence of that, what will tend to happen is people will get very comfortable. They'll like it and they'll want it to stay that way. They won't notice when it stops working. And they'll also become more risk averse. So doing well will make people more nervous about doing poorly, about trying. And so
Hmm.
then you don't want to try new things, because what if it doesn't go well?
Yeah.
Um,
What if it's not as successful as before?
yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Another way that this can happen too is with our leadership. So if you have a very successful leader, or a leader that does things very, very well, it can be very tempting at this stage to not allow other people into leadership.
Hmm.
Because they're not going to be as good, because they're new, and you need to train them. And the growth of a leader includes learning from mistakes. But if we're so afraid of failure, or we so highly value some really, really highly skilled leaders, it can prevent us from developing new leaders, from entrusting other people to take on leadership roles, even though they're gonna make some mess ups. They're gonna make mistakes, and they will fail at things. You need them to go through those experiences and learn so that they can grow.
Mm.
So those are a couple of the ways that success can keep us uh, from growth and get us off track. Um, so uh, as we look at how to kind of inoculate ourselves against that, I think it's important again to go back to when you do recognize something that's been accomplished, that you give God the credit,
Mm.
and that you tell that story over and over again to give people courage to continue to step out in faith. So the part of the success, the way you tell it, the way you talk about the success, that accomplishment, that ministry that's gone well, you start a little bit further back, right? So
Mm.
those who want to keep the status quo may focus on the end accomplishment of that ministry. Like, wow, I remember when that ministry there's 100 people coming every week to this, you know, whatever, and so we need to get back to that. That's not necessarily helpful to repeat, because it can make us scared of trying new things. But the part of the story that you want to tell is the
Mm.
beginning that led to that success. So that might be, we were really wrestling with how do we connect with our community, and we decided we needed to step out in faith and try something new. And so we started a new ministry, or we had conversations with our neighbors, and we talked with community leaders, and we found out that a huge need of the community was fill in the blank. And so we decided to try this. We'd never done it before. It was beyond our ability to do. We couldn't do this without the help of the Holy Spirit, without God's guidance and provision.
Yeah.
And then it worked. So you're repeating the kind of the trusting in God, the risk taking, um,
Yeah.
the connection to the community.
Yeah. I try to use success to empower evangelism, in terms of a person who sees something that is going very well. And then I use that success to say, who can you share that with? Like, not so much,
Awesome. Yeah.
not so much in terms of like, um, to make them feel like they should come with you, but more along the lines of like, you're really encouraged by this. Who can you encourage that with so that they move forward? One of the things that I've been really big into, and I use it as a sermon illustration, and I've talked about it here too, is uh, asking people what blessings have they experienced during COVID? Not so much that COVID's a blessing, but like, what are the blessings that you've experienced from it? What success have you had? Because a lot of times when we're talking about COVID, it gets people like, oh, we don't get to see so-and-so. We can't go over here. We can't do this. We can't do that. We're unable to do what we used to be able to do. And people can get like really bogged down in that negative, as opposed to looking forward to looking at the positive things that are going on, using those successes as a way to propel you and empower you to move forward. And so one of the things that I've done at our church when we first started was, right when COVID happened, I said, hey, every morning I'm going to send out a devotional that's going to encourage you. And I got to be honest, full transparency, I don't write them. I have a Kindle that has a whole bunch of really good devotionals, and I just copy and paste them.
Yeah.
And people are super encouraged by that.
And you're not plagiarizing. You cite your sources every day.
Cite it all the way. I mean, there's
Mike
no
the plagiarist.
There's no there's no need to really steal that, because if it's good, man, let people know here's so and so. And it's really good because then it's people aren't thinking like, man, Pastor Mike's got it all together. And it's like, no, this devotionalist, he's doing a great job. And we have different people who say different stuff. So it's a great perspective thing. And so the success with that is when we first started, people were really encouraged by it. And I tried to use that success as a propelling thing to say, well, who can you share it with? And so now every morning it went from like maybe 20 people to now I'm sending it out to over 70 people in the morning through either
Wow.
email or not counting when I share it on Facebook and people who just organically see it on Facebook. So I'm sending it to 70 people specifically for the devotional. And it's great. And using that success to which I didn't even have a part of. I started it and then just people were like, I'm encouraged by this. And I said, good. If you're encouraged by it, share it with somebody else. And then just allowing people to do it. So I think success has the ability to either be, hey, we're going to sit in this complacency stew for a long time. And eventually we're just going to all be cooked, as opposed to using it.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. As opposed to like using it to share with other people. We're just going to kind of sit there and say, hey, remember the good old days when XYZ? And it's like, well, yeah, I guess. But where has that gotten us now today? And then what you end up having to do, then like your success, you're like, oh yeah, now we don't really have that anymore. It always brings it back to reality because success is temporary. And unless we're sharing the gospel, that's the thing that makes it eternal. That's the thing that moves it forward is we're not sharing these successes in a temporary way. We're sharing them in an eternal way by encouraging people with the gospel to kind of bring that forward. So, all right, that's enough rambling on for me. Ryan, take over.
I want to, so a couple of thoughts, but one thing I want to say is just your story with that devotional. That's great. Like, so we might be tempted to say, oh, Mike, that's so great. Never stop doing that and never change that. Like every morning now for the rest of your life, you should send this out to people. Right. But we do that so often with, that just makes you laugh, but we do that with ministries in the church all the time. And because like eventually it's going to stop working or people are going to stop.
Right.
It's going to lose its effectiveness and you need to do something different. So you'll change it.
It's perfect for the time that we find ourselves in right now.
Yeah. There will come a time when you stop doing it. Like back in the first few months of COVID, we were doing weekly webinars.
Oh,
that was good for a time.
They were great.
But and we had so many great people contributing to that. Where we do 1 or 2 a week. But it became clear like that's not helpful at a certain stage. So
because you could tell that people were getting totally shocked by the amount of screen time. Screen time was literally killing people. And they were like, I'm done.
Yep.
They were fried.
Yeah. And
so
a lot more resources were available. Right. It changed the priority of catching that webinar or whatever too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So on this note too, I want to just, before we wrap up here, I also want to talk about failure. So there is a way to, this is all about success, but I also want to just mention something about failure. And we can leverage failure as well. And there is a narrative we need to tell when we try something and fail. So I want to encourage, if you're an elder or a pastor, to celebrate failure. And not that, I'm not talking about like doing a terrible job or being ineffective or incompetent. I'm not saying celebrate that, but celebrate when you try something and it doesn't work. Celebrate that with your church. Say, man, I am so proud of this church. We tried this ministry. We took a step of faith. We gave it our all and it didn't work. And I look back and I'm just so thankful that God gave us the courage to take this step. It just shows how passionate we are about the gospel, about reaching our community. And I know we're not going to give up. We're going to keep trying.
Yeah.
And I'm just so thankful, so proud of you guys.
Yeah.
You made this effort and that you weren't afraid.
Yeah.
And we're going to need to remember that as we make our next attempt to not be afraid. Let's never forget that. And let's not be ashamed that what we tried didn't work.
And I mean, there's a biblical tie-in to that too, Ryan. And I'm not going to cite the verse because if I get it wrong, people are going to just hammer me. So I'm just going to tell you that the Apostle Paul wrote that there is power in weakness.
Yeah.
Think about that. My grace is sufficient for you because my power is made perfect in weakness. And so if we're willing to be transparent and share not only the successes, but the failures, and realize that all of them were attempting to point to Christ, they were all a success then.
Yeah.
Even if you started a new Bible
Beautifully
study and
said.
literally one person came, well, guess what? That's still a success because you shared the gospel.
Mhm.
You still did it. And the gospel was proclaimed, and admitting that something didn't work is allowing Christ to show his ultimate victory in it.
Yeah.
Totally.
Awesome.
So any more key things to share? You don't have a book this time, Ryan, to share with us. What happened? No book today?
No books.
Oh my goodness.
Sorry, man.
Oh, I was looking forward to it, and now, because that gave me enough time to pull up my phone as we get to the closer to have you pitch it, and now I just had to look a little awkward while I'm doing it. So Ryan, once again, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. You are a fountain of knowledge, and we are appreciative for it.
Thanks for the chance to share. Appreciate it. It was great.
To our listener, once again, we hope that you're enjoying yourself.
Did you say to our listener? Is that what you said?
Yeah. Power is
probably
made
down to
perfect in
one
weakness.
listener now.
Yeah, but what we're doing though is we're making it so individualized that we are speaking. It's like we're here with you. If you're driving in your car listening to us, we're literally here. We're jamming out with you to your tunes after you turn us off and you listen to something else. If you're at home, we're right there. We're sitting, we're having a cup of coffee with you on your couch. If you have a recliner, even better. That's great. That's where we want to be. So to our listener, because it's an individual, we're happy that you're here. Thanks for joining in, being a part of this podcast. We would love to hear from you. If you have any topics that you would like to be covered, you have any ideas for us, you have any critiques where you're like, Mike, I just really don't like the train thing. I'm going to tell you, if you don't like the train thing, keep it to yourself because I'm going to continue on doing it. But if there's anything else that you'd like to share as a form of critique, anything that you'd like us to cover, please reach out to us. Talk to me personally, talk to Ryan personally. You could email us at podcast@clbforge.org. And we'd be encouraged to hear from you. We'd love to interact with you. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so that on Tuesday you get a notification when it's available. And we'd also be super encouraged if you would share it with a friend or family member or even a colleague that you work with. Sharing is caring, and that's where we're going to leave it. All right, guys, have a great rest of your night or day or afternoon or wherever you're at. See ya.